Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. We will get started in about 120 seconds. If somebody could just send me a message on the message column on the right-hand side, just telling me you can hear me, that'd be great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for those messages. That's great. Just give it another minute just to see everybody join in. Thanks very much. Few seconds longer. I see people starting to sign in now. Okay, well let's get going then. It's just after 11, and welcome to today's webinar at 11 o'clock on November the 21st, this sunny November day. We'll go for about 50 minutes, I guess, today, and everybody who participates will, of course, get a copy of the recording. And that'll get to you sometime during the course of today. So let's get started. Today's webinar, as you'd be aware, is sponsored by the local government professionals, and good on them for doing so. Thank you. My name's John Carlson. My background's in psychology, education, and business. I specialise these days in consumer behaviour management. I've been advising the private and public sectors for about 25 years. And these days I call myself a company director and strategic advisor, for what that's worth. Today's webinar, as you know, is called Defending a Local Government under Unreasonable Attack. And the emphasis, of course, will be on the word defending, and perhaps going a little further than defending, actually using attacks to enhance the position and make local governments look better than they did prior to the attack. Just to start with a couple of observations about this whole issue of attack on social media. Firstly, local governments are an all too easy target. That's no fault of their own. It's just the fact that they exist. They're relatively large, they're relatively obvious, and everybody's not happy with something. So they are an easy target, and therefore, even if your local government hasn't been attacked to date, it will be at some stage into the future. It's just too easy. Secondly, follows on, most local governments will be attacked either now or sometime in the future, for better or for worse. Two other observations. Strategy beats tactics every time. And what I want to talk about here is strategies for reducing the level of attack and then dealing with those attacks on an ongoing basis, or as and when they arise. We will talk about some tactics you can use when you're under attack, but I think a more strategic approach, a more long-term approach to dealing with the likelihood of disruption and attack is much more effective. And finally, social media is a critical tool. In 2019, or perhaps in effective terms, 2020, you won't be able to deal with any of these attacks without engaging in social media. The resistance by some local governments to get involved in local media is naive. The fact of the matter is people are already discussing your local government on social media now, whether or not you're engaging in that discussion or whether or not that discussion is occurring on a formal channel, one you've established, makes no difference. The fact of the matter is people are having those conversations on social media now. Interesting story, I attended a conference some years ago, and there was the general manager of marketing there for one of the largest corporations in Australia. And he said, I love social media. He said, I love it because people have always been saying negative things about my organisation. But now by establishing a social media channel, I can see what they're saying, I can learn from what they're saying, and I can respond to what they're saying. So rather than seeing social media as something which can get you into trouble, you should be seeing social media as something which is A, necessary, 2, unavoidable, 3, a place where you can learn what people are thinking, and 4, a forum in which you can engage in conversations and lessen people's concerns. The other thing I'd say about that is that you need to set up your own social media channels and you need to manage them. That way, what is said will be said on those channels, and people will use those channels to make comments, and therefore you can see them, read them, understand them, engage with them, respond to them. Whereas if they have those conversations on channels that you are not involved in, you often don't know what's being said, and the criticism may escalate without you knowing it even started. So today I want to cover 3 issues: prevention, anticipation, and resolution. That is, how do we prevent attack? And there are some really important strategies you can put in place to make attacks much less common. Secondly, how do we anticipate it? How do we know before it's going to happen that it's going to happen? And how do we get ready to squash it as soon as it happens? And then how do we resolve a dispute when it arises? So let's start with prevention. I don't know anything about Australian rules football, and to be honest, and at the risk of offending anybody, I don't want to know anything about Australian rules football. But what I do know is that the Collingwood Football Club is the largest club of any kind in Australia. It has a passionate membership that believe in each other, believe in their cause, defend each other at any cause. They are, by any definition, a tribe who will be critical of other tribes in their code or even in other codes, a tribe who will be reluctant to criticise each other because they are part of the same tribe, part of the same community, and a tribe that is unlikely to attack each other and unlikely to voice any disagreements they have with each other outside of the community. They stick together. They believe in each other. They have a common view of the world, and therefore the likelihood of attack is low. And there's a lot to learn from these kinds of tribes. And in fact, I'd argue that all organisations, including local governments, should place a high priority in building a tribe. And you build a tribe or a group of people who stick together, who are less critical about each other, who are less likely to attack each other and are more likely to work together. You build a tribe by establishing shared aspirations. What are we trying to achieve here? And making sure that what we're trying to achieve, or at least the messages related to that which are communicated, are common for all parties. So that the local government and the broader community are in it together. They both see the local government as trying to achieve something that they also aspire to. They have a connection in terms of their vision, in terms of what might be created into the future. So rather than a local government creating something and then hoping people get on board with it, it's about finding out what the community wants, and even if you're nowhere near being there yet, creating that shared aspiration, painting that shared vision, and getting the community to see that you're on their side, that you're working for their aspirations, that you're working for their vision. The second thing a tribe is all about is people with shared values. They believe in the same things. They largely believe that the same things are right and the same things are wrong. And they feel an empathy towards each other because they share those values. Of course, most organisations, and I suspect local governments are no different, establish their values in a boardroom or in a meeting room or in a committee room, and then they communicate them to the world. When in reality, what we need to do is go out into the community and see what the community values, and then create values that are in sync with that broader community. Because if our values are in sync and our aspirations are in sync, in other words, if we're trying to achieve roughly the same thing, if we're agreeing on roughly the direction forward and we're agreeing on the values, then we're a long way down the track towards building a Collingwood type tribe. We are a long way down the track towards creating shared trust, where both the local government and the community and all the various individuals and groups within that community believe that each party is acting in good faith. Because we share the vision or the aspirations, because we share the values, we all believe we're moving in the same direction with the same beliefs, and therefore we are all acting in good faith. And therefore, even when we make mistakes or do something wrong or do something that the other parties don't agree with, we still recognise that we're part of the same tribe, that we share values and aspirations, and we understand that all we need to do perhaps is sit down and have a conversation and resolve our differences rather than going to war. And if we are going to go to war, it's with somebody else outside of our tribe, outside of our community, outside of our local government area. So to me, this is the starting point for preventing any kind of aggression or any arguments or fights within a community. Create a tribe, a community that belongs together. Now, a tribe has two critical components. It has a trusted brand, and that brand is the leader, if you like. In the case of a football club, I guess it's the president and the captain, and it has a community. It has a group of people who are moving together. So in the environment we're talking about, the tribe has leadership from the local government, and then the whole community working with the local government to move forward in a common direction. And I just want to now touch on those two issues. How do we create a trusted brand and how do we build a community? So trusted brand. An integral part of leadership is creating a community, a group of people who share values, a tribe. My observation about this is that local governments are good at what they do. In fact, they seem to be very good at what they do, but they're not particularly good at building a trusted brand. They're not particularly good in building a brand that the community views as having the same aspirations they have and the same values they have. And I'll tell you why I think this is the case. I think it's the case because the local government, acting in good faith, does these things internally. It doesn't engage with the community and say to the community on a regular basis, what do you want in your community? What do you want your community to look like into the future? What are your aspirations? What do you need in your environment, and what do you believe in? And then, having identified those things, build a brand around those things, a trusted brand around those two things, and then maintaining that trust by continually going back to the community and saying, how are we going? What can we improve? By continually going back to the community and updating them and making sure they're clear on the action you're taking towards achieving their aspirations, and on, critically, how the things you are doing will help them achieve their aspirations. They're not necessarily interested in how a project you're working on will deliver benefits to the community or a section of the community, but they're very interested in how a project you're working on will contribute towards them achieving their ultimate aspirations for the region. So I think what I'm saying there is that local governments need to get closer to the community and be seen to be closer to the community. And that involves an ongoing conversation, and I'll talk about how to do that in a moment, and ongoing feedback and really understanding. It does not involve and cannot involve setting those aspirations or vision in a committee room, setting the values in the committee room, and then communicating to the staff and to the broader target audience. That approach will invariably fail to create trust. It will be seen as Big Brother telling us the way it's going to be, and that never builds trust. So developing a trusted brand involves three things, and we're not going to go into branding in any depth here. We did that in the webinar last week, and if anybody wants a copy of that webinar, I'm happy to send you one. But we develop a trusted brand by firstly defining that brand, defining what our aspirations are and defining what our values are. And we do that in conjunction with the community. That's what I've just said. We don't do it in a committee room. We don't do it in a in a council meeting room. We build brands by talking with the community, not at them, not to them, but with them, finding out what they firmly believe in, what their aspirations are, and then finding the aspects of those two things that we have in common with them as an organisation, and then building the brand around that. So once you've defined your brand in a way that the audience relates to and in conjunction with that community, then you've got to live it. You've actually got to be it. There is nothing more naff than listing your values on a website or in a brochure or in your annual report. Listing them says two things. One, we haven't communicated them, well, it says one thing, basically. We haven't communicated them well enough that people understand, through our behaviour, that people understand them. We have to tell people what our values are. If you have to tell people what your values are, then you're not communicating them effectively, and more importantly, you're not living them. Values and vision or aspirations are communicated through behaviour. It is the way you behave, it's the way your staff behave towards the community, it's the way they behave on the telephone, at the front counter, in interactions with specialists within your organisation. It's the way they interact in terms of the tone of voice in letters, in brochures, on websites. All of these things affect their understanding of what you're all about. All of these things communicate the brand. Simply telling people what your vision is, simply telling people what your values are, in my view, does more harm than good. And if you have to do it, it shows me at least, that you're not living the brand. You've got to define it, and then you've got to say, well, these are the key 6 or 7 points that define our brand. Then how do we have to behave every day in every job in order to bring that description of the brand to life? That is the critical discussion. That's how you create a brand. That's how you build a brand that causes trust. And then communicating that brand is certainly done through PR and advertising and websites and things like that. But first and foremost, it's done by way of the behaviour of your people. Your behaviour of people at every interaction with a member of the community, your behaviour at meetings, your behaviour at public meetings, your behaviour in drafting and creating communication materials. So you define the brand with the community, find out what matters to the community, and define your brand in a way that matches that. Then you live it. You create a culture within your organisation that reflects that brand in everything you do, and then you communicate it. If you take those 3 steps in order and start with engaging the community to define your brand rather than doing it in a meeting room, you will find you build a trusted brand very quickly. And if you build a trusted brand, the level of dispute, the number of times people fight with you, the number of wars that are started on social media or in any other forum will diminish radically. Organisations that people feel engaged with, that organisations where they trust the brand, receive a lot less criticism than organisations where they don't engage. And it's not enough not to be negative. You've got to be positive. You've got to have a positive relationship. Be a trusted brand, not just a not untrusted brand. You've actually got to be a trusted brand. And then that sort of leads to this model, which I went through in detail in the last webinar, which I won't go through now. But again, send me a message and I'll send you a copy of the other webinar from last week. But it talks about the fact this model that brands are created by a culture. So you develop the brand, that is, you define the brand and the strategy put into place. You then create the culture and live the brand. You then live the brand and you then communicate it, partially through that behaviour, but then more broadly. So brands are built through culture, not through advertising, not through public relations, not through websites. Brands are built through culture. And if you can build a great brand through culture, trust me, you'll protect enormously against being attacked by other organisations or individuals within your community. The key brand components, and I've touched on two of them: the vision, the aspirations, what are we trying to achieve? So we need to all be working in the same direction. The values, we need to all believe in the same core values. And thirdly, the personality. What do you like to deal with? Are you casual? Are you relaxed? Are you formal? Are you conservative? Are you progressive? You know, what personality do you exude? And all three of those things need to be reflected in all of the behaviour of all of the staff. And if you do that, you will get a trusted brand and you will get less criticism. And what does a trusted brand deliver? A reserve of goodwill. People trust a trusted brand. They feel strongly towards a trusted brand. And if that brand stuffs up, they'll still go back. Consider, for example, Apple, probably the most trusted brand in the world. If you buy an Apple phone and it fails on you, very few people will say, I'll never buy Apple again. They'll go and talk to Apple about it. They'll forgive them the mistake because they've got this stock of goodwill, because it's an organisation that has consistently delivered in the past. And certainly if you buy 6 phones in a row or even 2 or 3 in a row, that might affect you. But if you buy one and it just isn't up to the same standard of the others, you're more likely to go back and complain or to discuss it with somebody and find a solution. Your image of the brand will be strong. You'll have stronger goodwill and you'll forgive. And most importantly, you'll have a propensity to believe. So if it's a trusted brand and they say, we will fix this problem, you'll believe them. If you don't trust the brand and they say, we will fix this problem, you tend not to believe them. If Apple says to you, I'm going to fix this problem, you'll tend to believe it. If Telstra says to you, I'll fix this problem, you'll wonder, will they really fix this problem? A trusted local government that says, I know you're feeling a bit of pain with these developments we're doing now, but it'll be okay in the long run. A trusted local government saying that will not get flack or very little of it. A local government that is not trusted, for which there is no strong relationship, will attract criticism because they'll be less likely to believe you, they'll be less likely to forgive you any mistakes that have been made, and they'll be less likely to have a stock of goodwill. But if you share the vision or aspirations, if you share values and use that to build trust, then people will have goodwill. They'll be more inclined to forgive you, and they'll be more inclined to believe that you'll fix issues as and when they arise. To the second and very much related point, community. So we're building this brand, and then we go to community. What is a community? A community or a tribe is a group of people that have shared vision. We've talked about that. They're going in the same direction. They want to go to the same place. They have shared values. They roughly believe in the same things. And they have a shared understanding of each other's role in that. What's the local government going to do in that? What do I as an individual have to do in that? What do external parties have to do in that? And what do businesses and whatever in the local community also have to do about that? So a community has those three things. And until you have those three things, you don't have a community. What you have is people who live in the same geographic area in the case of a local government. If your community share your vision, share your values, and have a shared understanding of how the values will be lived and the vision will be achieved, you have a community. And that community will be less likely to attack you. If you don't have a shared vision, if you don't have shared values, if you don't have a shared understanding, you don't have a community, and they will be much more likely to attack you. And for those who might say, yes, but it's never the community as a whole that attacks us, it's an individual within the community. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you have a strong community, those individuals are fewer, and the rest of the community are more likely to come to your support and shut down the criticism. My observation, local governments suffer unnecessary stress and pain and criticism because they don't often, and they in fact rarely, have what I would define as a community, or at least a community based on that last definition that I just discussed with you. Ask yourself, if you went out into your community, would people share the vision of your local government? Would they see the end result of your hard work as being consistent with their aspirations? If you went out in the community and said, what are our values and do you share those values? How many people would say, I know your values and I share them? Or even if they don't know them, they might say, from the way you behave, I can imagine your values are 1, 2, 3. And I'll give you an example. The number one value of the Commonwealth Bank is integrity. Does anybody listening to this webinar have the perception that the Commonwealth Bank has integrity? The number one value of Optus is integrity. Does anybody here honestly consider Optus to be an organisation of high integrity? And the number one value of Coles, well, I think it's the number two value of Coles, is integrity. Well, they might be a good retailer, but does anybody genuinely consider them an organisation with integrity? Now, if you don't, you're not part of their community. You might be the occasional customer, but you're not part of their community. And the fact that you probably didn't even know that they were amongst their values, or you found it unlikely that they were their values, shows that you're not part of the Commonwealth Bank's community. You're not part of the Optus community. You're not part of the Coles community. And if we take the Apple example again, I suggest that nobody listening to this webinar today could, specifically articulate the 10 values of Apple. But I'm sure you could come close. You could certainly come up with words that mean pretty similar things to what is in that list. You have a pretty sound impression of what Apple stands for and what Apple is all about, even though you don't interact with them every day. In the case of a local government, that should be much easier, since residents interact directly or indirectly with their local government every day, even if it's just by driving on the roads that are maintained by the local government. So I think local governments need to get much closer to their community. Creating community involves, firstly, identifying the audiences precisely. All of you have got more than one audience, and all of those audiences have individual or unique characteristics. You need to understand them, and you need to understand them well. And part of that understanding is understanding what their aspirations are, and part of that understanding is understanding what their values are, and part of that understanding is understanding what personality, in terms of the local government, they will engage with. You need to identify your audience, then you need to really, really understand them. Then you need to address their expectations, absolutely. If they expect you to have a value called integrity, you need to have that value, and you need to find out from them what integrity looks like. That's the term that can be defined a number of ways, what it looks like and how you best deliver it. And then you've got to deliver it. It's not enough to say, we believe in transparency, and then not be transparent. Or to say we believe in transparency when your community just doesn't care about transparency. They're concerned about other things. So it's about identifying your audience, understanding them, addressing their expectations, and then demonstrating that you're doing that. And you need to demonstrate it rather than articulating. This is, I'll get back to the organisations that list their values on their website. That's telling people what your values are. And if you have to tell them, you're not living them. You're not communicating them through everything you do, everything you say, and every interaction they have with you. Brands are communicated by demonstration, not by articulation. And communities are built when the leaders, in this case the local government, demonstrates its commitment to its vision, its values, and its personality, not when it simply articulates them. And the features of a community are really that they understand what you're all about and you understand them. They're informed about what you're all about and you're informed about them. They're engaged because you share values and a vision, and they're supportive. They'll support you rather than criticise you. They'll defend you when others criticise you. And if they do criticise you, they'll tend to do it face-to-face or one-on-one, and they'll tend not to use the media as a means of doing that. And this is, to me, what a community is. It's about it's recognising there's all these audiences and bringing them in together, creating open dialogue with the community, real dialogue. And bearing in mind, the beginning of real dialogue is listening, listening, and listening. And it doesn't just mean doing the occasional survey. It means really engaging with your audience. It might mean setting up an online community as a way of bringing, as a way of creating a platform for discussion. Online communities, the one you just saw then is built on the curator platform. It brings communication costs down. It develops a community online, which then spills over into the offline environment, and it builds profiles of members. It gathers. Online communities provide a capacity for you to learn about your target audience, develop a relationship with that target audience, have that audience develop a relationship with each other, and then lower the cost of communication. There is nothing that will be more effective in helping you build a tribe, build a community based on a trusted brand than building an online community or building an online portal. Something a website can never and will never do. So do give some thought to online communities, an issue that I've addressed in detail in previous workshops, and if you'd like or previous webinars, and if you'd like a copy of those, please tell me. I'll send you a recording. So in terms of preparation, before we move on to prediction and resolution. So build a trusted brand. Define a consumer-focused brand. Your brand needs to be about your audience, not about yourself. Live that brand through culture and communicate it every day, not just through traditional communication, but also through behaviour. Build an engaged and supportive community. Build an online community that supports you offline. Understand your community really, really well by opening an ongoing dialogue with them and communicate consistently. You build a community or a tribe around a trusted brand, and the level of criticism will go through the floor. Don't do it, and the level of criticism will increase daily. So, how do we anticipate issues? Well, there's not a lot of rocket science to this, and there's not a lot of brilliant insights I can provide, but there are some things you need to do. Firstly, you need to monitor all media assiduously. You need a media monitoring service, and you need to know what's being said about you online and offline. And that way you can find the first seeds of negative publicity before it starts to build and build. And if you get in early, you can often nip it in the bud and stop it ever becoming a significant issue. You need to have policies and procedures for responding quickly. The faster you respond to an issue, the better off you'll be, the better will be the outcome. But you can't respond quickly, A, if you don't monitor it and see where the issues are, and B, don't have rapid response policies and procedures. If you have to sit down every time there's a crisis and work out a strategy, then you're delaying it too long. And if you then have to get agreement to that strategy from people in the hierarchy, then you are certainly waiting too long to respond. Whereas if the policies and procedures are documented and approved by the various people in the hierarchy, then you can simply just say, this has occurred, I'm pushing the button on a previously agreed procedure. And you need to have in place the skills and resources to act quickly. You need to be in social media, and you need to employ people that understand social media. Predicting, understand the community very well. Monitor all media channels and try to predict how the community will respond before they respond. You've had issues in the past. You know what the triggers are. Keep an ear to the ground and find out as early as possible. Document a crisis management policy, media response strategies, and make sure you've got qualified staff or the staff you need that can manage the criticism effectively and prevent it ideally from ever becoming a crisis. But if it does become a crisis, deal with it effectively at that point. And then the third point was having the resources. You need crisis management and social media skills on hand. You need strong relationships with traditional media, and you need a social media strategy using optimal channels. You've got to have an understanding of social media. You will never deal with serious crises in 2019 or 2020 without social media expertise, and not just the capacity to dabble in it, really understanding how to use it. It is a very powerful and at the same time very dangerous tool. It needs to be used well and wisely. You need a strong response, a strong relationship with traditional media, that is the local newspapers, television, radio, whatever, because that's often a very effective way of counteracting stuff that's being said on social media. And then you need to make sure you're using the right social media channels. In 2019, in terms of what local government is doing, there really are only two fundamental channels: Instagram for the under 40s and Facebook for the over 40s. They are slightly different media. They have slightly different requirements and needs, but that's in broad terms. If you're not on Facebook and you're not on Instagram, you're not playing the game. You're not engaged. You're not well set up to fight in the case of a confrontation. I'd also make the point that if you are also involved in LinkedIn, Twitter, and various other platforms, you're probably doing too much and spreading your resources too thinly. I think you should definitely be engaged in social media, but not in every platform. Choose your platforms wisely and start with Instagram and Facebook. So, anticipating action. Establish a process for monitoring traditional media, digital media, and community conversations. Know what's being said so that you're able to respond quickly. And secondly, prepare to act. And that is, you've got to have the policies that are approved, the procedures that are approved, the skills to do the job, and the resources to do the job. So that the earlier that you can get in there and address an issue, the better. Letting it fester will cause enormous problems. Providing time for people to ponder and think will only make it worse. You need somebody who has approval, the skills, the authority, and the determination to address it quickly. And ideally, there should be one single individual responsible for driving it. So, resolution, and I suspect this is the issue that most people were most interested in talking about. Once grief occurs, once people start attacking your local government, how do you resolve the problem? And of course, if you've built the brand well, if you've built the community well, if you've anticipated the issues and got in early, resolution is a lot easier. So even if it doesn't, even if branding, community, and anticipation doesn't resolve the issue, it'll certainly put you in a much better position, or doesn't prevent the issue, It'll put you in a much better position to resolve it quickly. So to resolution. 4 critical issues here. Early identification, that goes back to the prediction issue we've just discussed. Informed plan. You need a plan and it needs to be well informed. Effective implementation. So don't just have a plan, you've got to do it. And fourthly, a comprehensive wrap-up. And in many respects, or in every respect, that's as important as the other 3 stages. And I'll cover them, or the other 3 issues, and I'll cover them each now. So early identification. Early on in the process, you need to find out what's going on out there as early as possible, and that's your anticipation process. And then you need to determine who are the key players. Who are the people leading this? Because they are the people you need to communicate with first and foremost. It's the leaders that need to be the focus of your communication. Sure, you need to talk to the broader market, but you also need to target the leaders, and you need to understand the leaders, and you need to understand what their objectives are. What are they really trying to achieve? Are they trying to achieve what they're saying, or are they trying to achieve something else? What really is their core issues? Is it what they're saying, or is it something else? You must understand the players, what they're trying to achieve, and what their core issues are. And then you need to make an assessment of how critical is this issue. Because every fight is not a fight you want to have. And if somebody's just being a little critical of the local government and they're going to stop tomorrow and it's going to go away the day after, let them do it. And don't take it off social media, just leave it there. There are always critics out there, and you let critics be what critics are. You let them have their say, and 9 times out of 10, they're happy that they've had their say. If you've got something meaningful to say in response, sure, say it. But don't make a crisis out of something which is low level. Identify who are the players, what they're trying to achieve, what their real issues are, and then is this critical enough for me to respond to, or do I simply need to tell them, I hear what you're saying, we'll look into it, or I hear what you're saying, we'll do our best next time, or I hear what you're saying, these are really the facts. Give me a call if you have any further questions. So you've got to identify the issues very early on. Then you plan. You say, okay, we've got our standardised procedures. What outcomes do we want within those procedures from this particular incident? You know, those outcomes certainly might be a resolution of the conflict, but they might also be to turn a negative into a positive. And I'll talk about that again in a minute. But that's part of the wrap-up. You should use all negative publicity as an opportunity to create a positive impression of the local government, not just nullify the issue that's been raised. Then you need to agree on a strategy, and particularly what are the core messages, and agree on what the core channels are. You know, we're going to use Facebook, we're going to use Instagram, we're going to use Facebook and Instagram and the local newspaper and television. Are we going to do a brochure drop or a leaflet block? Are we going to put information on our website? What are the channels? What is the core message? And really nothing's more important than the message. And both the message and the channels are determined by, okay, what are we trying to get out of this resolution process? What do we want people to think at the end of the process? And how do we get them to think that quickly? So then the planning, then the implementation. And you got to act quickly and in a timely manner. Very, very few issues are resolved fast enough. We need to get in as early as possible and nip these things in the bud and then respond quickly and efficiently. We need to monitor all media response, not just the response to the individuals you're communicating with, but the broader response in the media. So you need media monitoring in place, and you need to engage traditional and digital media. As I said, I'm a big advocate for social media. You have to use it, but you also need to use local newspapers, and to an extent, local newspapers, radio, whatever, help to keep the social media honest and keep it in check. And finally, you need to monitor the impact of the strategy and fine-tune it as required. and then the wrap up. And what the wrap up's all about is turning a negative into a positive. And this is something you should think about right at the beginning of the attack. How can we manage this so that one of the outcomes is that the local government is seen as, even if it's made a mistake, as a more responsible organisation than it was previously, as a more trusted brand than it was previously, as an organisation that recognises its mistakes and responds quickly, as an organisation that listens, as an organisation that works with the community. So it's not just about solving the dispute. It's about how do we use this dispute to really demonstrate our values, to really demonstrate our vision. And to me, that's about turning a negative into a positive, and it's almost always possible. The second point is at the end of a dispute, thank the key players for their contributions, even those you don't agree with, even those that took the other sides. Thank them for their contribution, recognise it as a constructive debate, recognise the value of debate so that they end up with a more positive view of you. They don't end up with antagonism. Thirdly, detail the outcome and the rationale. Don't just solve the problem. Make sure that all stakeholders, all audience members, all audience groups understand the outcome and the rationale for that outcome. And where possible, get the sincere contributors, even if they're from the other side, to recognise your contribution, to recognise that you have come up with a solution, that you have compromised, if indeed you have, and that you do have a rationale for what you're doing. So turn that negative into a positive. Just some do's and don'ts with disputes of this nature. Firstly, there is nothing more important than listening. If you're going to set the right objectives, if you're going to get the message right, if you're going to respond with the right timing, you need to listen. Listen, listen, listen. Don't just talk at the audience. Listen to what they're saying and listen to what they're really saying. Get to the underlying motivations. Identify valid complaints and trolls, and I'll talk more about trolls in a moment. But if somebody's making a valid complaint, address it as a valid complaint. Recognise it as a valid complaint. If they're just trolls, recognise that they're trolls and put in place a troll response. And I'll talk about what a troll response looks like in a minute. But there are trolls, and by troll I mean somebody who's just causing grief for the sake of it. You can identify trolls, and there are good strategies for dealing with trolls, but you need to separate valid from trolls. So when somebody comes on and says, we're having problems with ABC, and you look at it and you think, I don't agree with them, I don't think it's a problem, but it's a valid concern, then that's great. But if somebody comes on and they're just beating up on you for the sake of beating up on you, you think that's a troll. Therefore, I need to look at my troll response. Act strategically, which is what I said right at the beginning. Think, what are the long-term outcomes of our behaviour? How do I predict where issues are going to happen into the future? What's my strategy for dealing with problems as they arise? Not simply responding to individual media releases or responding to things said at public meetings, but having an overall strategy. Take responsibility and be transparent. If you're screwed up, tell them you've screwed up. Don't ever screw up and not admit to it. And if you've got a solution, be transparent about that solution. Tell them exactly what it is. Make them think that everything to know is known by them. There's nothing being hidden, nothing secret, nothing they should know about. Nobody trusts people who keep secrets. Be transparent. Offer a local crafted response. Whilst I said you need to have policies and procedures in place, you need to make sure that the responses, your messaging, is tailored to your audience in your area. The message that might have worked in the Northwest is not going to work in the Southwest and won't work in the Southeast. You've got to tailor it to your audience and be customised as well, and craft your response. Think, how are they going to respond to this? Not just what do I want to say. Act proactively and quickly. So anticipate how they're going to behave and jump first, and be fast, be nimble. Don't have to keep going back to the chief executive for approval. You need to respond as quickly as possible. Humanize your communication. Don't make it sound like it came from a computer. Don't make it sound like it came from a committee. Don't make it sound like it came from a council or even a chief executive. Make it sound like it came from somebody just like them. Make your communication sound like it was written by one of their best friends. It is something they can trust. It's written by somebody they have empathy with. Centralize your communication. Don't have 6 different people communicating with different media and different audiences. Centralize it. Have one person responsible ultimately for what media is used, what messages are communicated, what outcomes are sought, and the overall strategy. One person. You can have other people doing some of the work, but one person making the core decisions. And if in doubt, take it offline. Get in front of people. Have public meetings. I'm a huge advocate for the use of social media, as I've said. But if an issue is getting huge, take it offline. Get face to face. There's nothing like getting serotonin happening. Serotonin only happens when a chemical in the brain, hormone in the brain, only happens when you're face to face, when you're actually having real human contact. We rely far too much on email. We rely far too much on newsletters. We rely far too much on websites, which are always less effective than people think they are. Get face to face with people. It's the fastest way of dealing with issues. And you'll find that people are far less aggro face to face than they are online. Some don'ts. I've alluded to the first one. Don't hide anything. And certainly don't be seen to be hiding anything. It is death. It destroys trust. Even if you're being sincere, don't hide stuff. Even if the solution you're offering is the best possible solution, don't hide stuff. They will find out. That's one of the downfalls, or one of the pitfalls of social media. Information travels very quickly once they do find out. Don't make cosmetic mistakes. You've probably noticed typos and spelling errors and all that kind of thing through this presentation. That's one of my trademarks, I'm afraid, but you shouldn't do it. When you're communicating with your audiences, make it look like it's a very considered response. There's no cosmetic errors. You're not using the wrong media. You're not saying the wrong things. You're not, using grammatical typing or whatever errors. Get it cosmetically right. Don't ever be defensive. Never get defensive. Never get back on the back foot. Stand shoulder to shoulder with people. State your place clearly. Admit where you're at fault. Accept their point of view, even if you don't agree with it. Accept that it's legitimate, but don't get defensive. Certainly don't respond when somebody says the local government's behaved irresponsibly. Don't say it's you that's being irresponsible or the like. You've got to keep it above that. Don't get defensive. Nobody trusts defensive people. Fourthly, don't delete negative comments, ever. When somebody goes online and says, I don't trust the city of whatever, or the town of, or the shire of, that's their prerogative. I don't trust the mayor so-and-so or the chief executive. That's their prerogative. Don't take that stuff off. Only ever take things off when it's abusive, slanderous, or outright offensive. But don't take critical comments off. Leave them on. You leave them on for 2 reasons. One is it looks honest. It looks like you're being sincere by not taking them off. 2 is if you take them off, people will think, I'm sure not everybody agrees with them. So you'll look dishonest. The next point, don't take anything personally. This is not about you, it's about them. Never play the man. It's about the issue. It's never about the complainant, no matter how aggressive the complainant is. Never respond to abuse. Just take it off. Never respond to abuse. And never get into a fight. Simply state your case, state the facts, stay mild-mannered and calm. Now, a moment ago, and I'm pushed for time now, I raised the issue of trolls. Trolls, of course, are people that come on and slander you, say negative stuff without really having a legitimate objective. They're just there to cause trouble, just there to criticise. Well, here's some tips for identifying a troll, and none of these tips are 100% guaranteed, but they're an insight at least. How legitimate is the issue they're complaining about? Now, even if you don't agree with it, you should recognise whether an issue is legitimate or not. If somebody says to you, a pathway is dangerous, and you think, well, I don't consider it dangerous, but yeah, I can see what they're saying, then that's a legitimate issue. But if they're saying to you something which is completely ridiculous, couldn't possibly be the case, and nobody else would believe it, then there's some likelihood you're dealing with a troll. Or if they're just hurling abuse without an issue, then there's some likelihood you're dealing with a troll. Second point is the location of the player. If it's a legitimate complaint, the likelihood is that it's going to come from within your area, your local government area. If it's outside, there's some chance it's not legitimate. And it's easy enough to go to the complainant's homepage on Facebook or whatever and get an idea of where they are. And if they're, or you might even know them, but if they're not in your area, then the chances that the criticism is legitimate is reduced a bit. Thirdly, the credibility of their argument. If they say this path's dangerous and it should be doubled in width, you might say, oh, hang on, that's just completely impossible. Or if they might say it can be widened by, half a slab or whatever, and you think, well, that's not going to happen, but I can see why they might be suggesting that. If they suggest that all children's play equipment be removed, that children's play equipment is dangerous, therefore all children's play equipment should be removed from all parks, you think, well, that's hardly a credible argument. So you look at the credibility of the argument. If it's credible, then it's more likely not to be a troll. If it's incredible, then it's more likely to be a troll. The tone and the language, people who have legitimate criticisms or legitimate issues tend to tone it down a bit and tend to have more constructive language, less abusive language. What is their orientation for a solution? So if in the comments being made, if in the dispute people are actually looking for a solution, or better still, proposing solutions, even if you don't agree with them, then they're probably not trolls. Trolls are not solution-oriented. They're problem-oriented. Trolls are looking for issues to bitch about. They're not looking for issues. They're not looking for solutions. Because as soon as you found a solution, there's nothing for them to moan and groan about. And if you're in any doubt, offer to take it offline. A troll will almost never take it offline. If you suspect they're a troll, simply say to them, can you give me a number? I'll call you and sort this out with you. Or can you give me your email address so we can talk directly? Or can we meet over coffee to discuss this? That might be a bit far-reaching, but you get my point. Get it offline is a very fast way to determine if it's a troll. If it's a troll, they won't want to go offline at all. So just bear those ideas in mind in terms of determining whether it's a troll. And if it is a troll, here's some strategies. Firstly, you should engage all players with care initially. So don't assume that because somebody has perhaps crossed one of those lines that I just talked about then, or that they're necessarily a troll. So stay open-minded as long as you can. Offer a logical, crafted response. Now, if their response to that, your logical, crafted response, is also logical, even if you don't agree with it, if it's also logical, then it's probably not a troll. If it's illogical and just further abuse, then there's a better chance that it's a troll. But trolls are more easily quietened if you always keep the response logical and crafted. They'll very often go away simply by you constantly providing facts. Whereas if you get stuck into them, they won't go away. That's feed. Make them feel heard. So look, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. We've got these strategies in place. Is there anything else I can help you with? So that again helps you identify a troll, but it also helps you to deal with them. Because if you're agreeing with them, it's harder for them to get aggressive towards you. Avoid arguing. Never get involved in an argument with a troll because that's what they're looking for. So I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Would you like to take this offline? Would you like to give me your phone call? Here is my phone number at the council. Give me a call. But avoid arguing at all costs. Identify the troll as early as you can. And if it is a troll, if you're sure it's a troll, just deprive them of oxygen. And what that means is give them the crafted response, make sure they feel heard, and then say nothing more. Just ignore them. And if you ignore them, 9 out of 10 trolls will go away. And again, I make the point, even from trolls, delete offensive material, but not negative material. So even if negative material is published by trolls, leave it there. You only take off offensive, abusive, slanderous content. Resolution then, the act, identify early, plan early, resolve it, and then make sure you wrap it up. Remember the do's and don'ts, which you'll all have a copy of soon when I send this to you, and identify and deal with trolls. You need to put your energy into people who have legitimate complaints or legitimate arguments, not into trolls. So identifying them early is important. In summary, build a trusted brand, communicate and build a tribe so crises are fewer and smaller. Anticipate through monitoring and documenting the approach, and act quickly and decisively, but strategically and methodically when issues arise. If you want any more information on this or any related issue, please visit my site at djohncarlsonesq.com. That's djohncarlsonesq.com. Of course, you'll get a copy of that in the presentation. My program, there's 6 webinars for the local government professionals in 2020. That program will be out in December, and I look forward to engaging with you all then. Next year, we'll have a roundtable discussion after our webinars. If there's anything you want further information on, please feel free to email me or call me. I'm happy to come down and talk to you about issues that I've raised during this webinar, or indeed any other webinar. Again, thanks to the local government professionals for sponsoring this event, and thank you for your participation. I'm afraid I've run over a little bit, which is why I rushed towards the end. Perhaps too much material in a short space of time. But I hope that's given you some insight, some ideas you can take away and perhaps use, or at least I hope you use the preparation ones. I hope you never need to use the resolution ideas. But if you do, at least you have the ideas, and I hope they help. If there's anything more, please email me or even message me now on this system, and I'll respond. Thanks very much for your participation. Enjoy the rest of the day, the week, and the year, and have a great Christmas and New Year. And we'll see you for the 2020 program. Thank you.